This video was recorded 2 times as fast as what I actually painted it. Cobalt blue was pre-mixed in a separate container so that I would have enough to paint with. I'm putting the cerulean blue in here, but I have a little bit too much water for this particular type of paper. This paper doesn't accept water very easily, and it just kind of sits on top of the paper. And the next step, I'm getting ready to put in some darker value to put the darker clouds in, which will be the indigo added to the cerulean. As I put the darker value in, I need to soften the edges to keep the clouds looking like clouds, that they're puffy, and dropping in a darker color. Notice on the top of the paper there is a puddle of water and color, which I'll later have to fix after this dries. What I should have done in the beginning is watch that color and where it was puddling and taken some of the moisture out. I could have avoided that, but not using this type of paper very much and only doing this as an experiment, I discovered that using too much water on this paper is not a good thing. I'm putting in the tree area with some cerulean blue, a little bit of cobalt, some sap green, and indigo. I also add some Aureolin yellow to make it green up a little bit, get a little bit more warm. And then I soften the edges. Notice how the paint does not continue to move. It ends up going into a hard edge, and that for me is frustrating because I'm not used to this type of paper. I usually use Fabriano, but I tried out the Canson on this one, and It just was more difficult for me to use. But I'm dealing with it, and I just wanted to let you show you that. Moving the green toned color down into the bottom of the paper. Into that mix, I add a little bit of ultramarine and a little bit of Alizarin crimson, just to make it a slightly purple, just to make it look like it's one of the distant mountains. Remember, cool colors recede, warm colors come forward. Using sap green, ultramarine blue, a few touches of the indigo to give it texture, following across the roof lines and being careful not to get down into the roof line, and carrying the green across the tree line and into the other area of the trees. Vary the greens by touching one different color into another color and let it paint itself. Don't mix it on the paper. It'll become muddy. So the idea is to keep it as fresh and clean as possible. Ultramarine blue, some indigo, some yellow, some sap green. I didn't mix it all together on the palette. I just picked up portions of it from the palette and used it on the skyline, the tree line, and to give it definition. But notice that drip that went down there when the paper was wet, and that's going to be a problem area a little later. Touching the sky with the back of my hand, it's still wet. It's still too damp to put any new color in. Cooler green toward the buildings, and as it comes forward, it'll get slightly warmer. Notice I continue to keep the bead moving. You don't want to let that bottom area of the paint get dry, otherwise you'll get a line. So follow the bead and keep it moving. Indigo goes into this area to create an impression of a shadow from a tree that could be out of the scene of the painting. Other areas are also indigo. A little bit of ultramarine blue also added to it. I'm lifting out an area here where I want to put in a reflection of water, a puddle of water that could be sitting in the grass that will show a color of the sky. Drying the area so that I can continue to work. It was just a little too wet and too damp. Lifting a little bit of an area here to give the impression of a rooftop. painting the rooftops with Paynes Gray and a touch of red brown. Same for all of them that goes across, and then I'll eventually do some shading on the right side of the buildings to give the impression of the shadow from that is being cast. Paynes Gray on the roof, and then I touch it with the red brown. You don't have to scrub it in or try to mix it, just let it paint itself as long as it's wet underneath. Now I'm going to lift out some paint to give the impression of cattle in the meadow, which I'll later do a little bit of the detailing in, just the suggestions of cattle. Now I've turned the paper because I'm going to put in some cobalt blue. The cobalt blue that's already mixed up in the little cup. And I'm going to put that on the area in the sky where I have those runs and drips. And hopefully we'll be able to blend it in enough. If I continue to work on it, it'll continue to move and lift the paper and it'll get back to the white, which I don't want to do. So I'm hoping that this effort will work. I decide I'm going to let the sky go. Can't do any more to it. And it could appear as distant clouds. So I'm going to let it go and let the water and paint do whatever it's going to do. If I try to fix it, it's going to mess it up even more. So sometimes it's best just to stop. putting in some shadows where the clouds are casting a shadow on the mountain. Lifting some more of the green to indicate the areas for the cattle. I'm using a Fritch, F-R-I-T-C-H, scrubber and lifting some of the paint out. I wet the scrubber and then lift the paint. Then putting the barbed wire fence in. And if the line got a little too heavy, I just blot it right away so that it's not too heavy. It's not important to make a dark line across here. You don't want to make a straight solid line. You want to be able to have the eye move through that fence. And also I try to add a little bit of detail as far as putting little barbs on there. I'm using a pretty thick mix of ultramarine blue and bird sienna to make a very, very dark brown, brownish black to make the spots on the cows. Trying to put a few leg shapes there, but not really saying too much about the specific shape. Using the same mixture as I did for the cows, the markings on the cows, I'm using a dry brush technique for the post to create texture. I'll then put in some highlights by lifting some paint. Here I'm trying to show a little bit of the water area and to try to put a little bit of the blue sky into that area, lifting some paint, lifting color, and putting some cobalt blue into the waterline. Then I darken the bottom to make it a little bit more noticeable. I'm doing dry brush and adding texture to the foreground to create the impression of grasses.